Well, hello, my fabulous friends. I hope you're doing well. A little something different today. I know I've talked a lot about my grandmothers, my Oma, my granny, and I haven't talked much about my grandfathers. And in fact, I only knew one of my grandfathers, my Opa. And I'm going to call this the fork. Opa was a POW in World War II. He was a young man of fighting age, and when the Nazis took over Holland, they rounded up all the men who were 18 and over of fighting age in their village, and they put them on a train and they brought them to Germany. He was in a concentration camp near Hamburg. He left my dad at age 5, and my grandmother, my Oma, was pregnant with her second child. They were taken in the middle of the night with the clothes that were on their back. They had no idea where they were going, if they'd even make it out alive. So when they got to the camp, disoriented, hungry, remember they were in train, so they only saw black for days upon end. So they didn't know if it was, they had no idea where they were at all. They were all just kind of thrown into one big room, no bed, sleeping on the dirt floor. They didn't even have toilets. They had, like Opa said, like animals. They were treated like animals. Well, Opa he saw a glimmer in the dirt, and he went over, and here was a fork. There was a fork. And my Opa said, as long as I can eat like a human being, they cannot take my dignity, and I will survive this. And if you look very closely at the tines on this fork, they are quite worn down. And my Opa ate with this fork every day of his life when he was home. Of course, not at a restaurant or when he was on holidays. But if he was home, he ate with Opa's fork. And I remember being a little girl, and we'd have to set the table, and we had to make sure it was Opa's fork. If you look closely, can you see how it's worn down? Because he would eat, he would drag the fork across a plate. And you can see how it wore down, or this way, all those years of using the same fork, because this fork reminded him he could survive anything. And he ate with this fork. He said he even had water, soup, and moldy bread, but he always had his fork with him. He'd eat his piece of bread with the fork just to prove he was still human and not an animal. And the war was over, and my Opa wasn't coming home. And by this time the baby was born, but the baby was born quite developmentally delayed, because that was the winter of hunger in Holland. And my grandmother gave all her nutrition to my dad. He was only 5, and she just simply didn't have the nutrition to develop a baby properly. And so my Opa, the war ended, and it was 3 weeks, no Opa, 4 weeks, no Opa, 5 weeks, no Opa. Now you have to remember, Holland was bombed. The telephone lines were down. There were no telephone lines to speak of. So she wasn't getting any word, 5 weeks went on. She finally just realized everybody else's husbands were coming home or had news of somebody, passing away, confirmation, and nothing. Finally, on week 6, my Opa walked through the doors, and my grandmother thought she saw a ghost and she screamed and she fainted. But he was so skinny, she didn't recognize him. He was so sick and so skinny. And the reason he was 6 weeks late was because he had dysentery, I think it's called. And they kept him in the hospital. The Red Cross put him in a hospital till he was strong enough to go home. He didn't know what he was coming home to. He didn't know Did he still have a wife, or was she killed? He didn't know if the baby was born. So it was quite the reunion. And then in this picture, this is a picture of my opa holding his fork, telling his story. That if, and I just, this Remembrance Day, if he could survive that, we can survive anything. And this is why Remembrance Day, when it was the Boy Scouts who found him, and he said in the concentration camp, they opened the gates and they said, "You are free." They all sat there. They thought it was a trick. They thought they were going to get shot because they don't speak English. They didn't know English at all. So they didn't know what they were saying. I mean, they look at these boys, or they don't know what Boy Scouts are. They don't, and then they realize it was the American military that came and kind of explained to them, "You're free. We're here to save you." And that's when they realized that they actually were free. But when the Cold War started kicking up in the 50s, my Oma was so scared my Opa would be taken again, or she would lose another son. That baby died. The baby died 2 weeks after Opa got home. So he got to hold his son for 2 weeks, and he died. And my Oma was just so scared. By this point, she had 2 other children, and she was just so scared that her husband would be taken or she would lose another son that she insisted they'd leave Holland for Canada. When my Opa got here, he dedicated his life to the Boy Scouts of Canada, and he worked for them until he was 72 years old. And surprising, this is a man who had no hate in his heart because he saw what hate could do. So this Remembrance Day, even though I know Remembrance Day is for World War I, we've been to Vimy Ridge, but this Remembrance Day, like every Remembrance Day, I'm so thankful for all the Canadians, all the Americans, everyone who freed Holland and my family from that terrible war. Oh boy. I just watched Rivers' commentary, and that's what sparked me to do this one. But yeah, always maintain your dignity in everything you do, and you'll get through it. Thank you for watching. And please, this Remembrance Day, be thankful for the freedoms that you have, because they can be taken away in a heartbeat, middle of the night. Take good care. Bye for now.